So to further, right, talk and continue what we were doing with the characters, it's getting the perspective as we built up and talked about, the matrix, the world around us, the things that make that up, and then in relation to then our programming of our own brain, our body, which takes us around the 3D world, the reality world, the people closest to us, what that is. Okay, the difference in our heads. And that's kind of the yin to the yang and the understanding the darkness to the light, but what's inside us, and then how that relates to the programming of our brain, which then translates into how we have our habits, which affect our body, why we do what we do, etc., and understanding that. So the first base, because everybody has multiple personalities, when, where, and why, and where that comes from. But the first base we have to go to, and the easiest way to explain it is to exaggerate things. And that's where fiction comes in creation, because it opens the mind to here. This is in the mind of different possibilities, but even in the if you were to translate to that into the 3D world, people understanding, and especially now with AI and creations and different things on what could be created when layered and put together so that people could actually visually see it. Well, that's what, like, when you watch a movie, how did they create that? How did they make that? Well, different layers of graphics, different layers of creativity. Then somebody now visually sees it. Oh, I can understand. Well, that's a way of education when people can follow that to understand the theory of relativity. Like, I've never learned in a traditional way, even with like I won a science award when I was in high school, but in the special, because I have special needs group, because I need the visuals, the understanding, but also the experience, right? But that's humans learn faster that way and better. There are humans that learn very well when they go to school. They can follow the tradition, learn from a textbook, a regimen, etc. But a lot of times they lack emotional IQ. So piecing those things together on how somebody learns and understands the modern world, the new world, how information comes to us, but at the same time slowing that brain down. So we have to understand that for ourselves. So your characters, and as we've talked about, so we have you in the 3D world. That's you over there. That's coming to brutal honesty. That's the first stages of where we're at on what are you doing now? Like, what is your limitations now? The honesty of that. What is your age now? What is your weight now? Like, all, and that's brutal honesty and looking at yourself and present with that. Okay, then we get into the in our heads, right? That's where anxiety comes from, worries of the future, depression, reliving the past, and it's sometimes both are because they're in our us as humans, because it's a sign that we need to pay attention to something, but that's learning the coping skills of when that comes up on how to pay attention to it. Okay, use the creativity around that. So what in our mind, right? It's like the angel and the devil, the superhero and the villain, and seeing ourselves that way as we develop those characters when we're self-sabotaging, how that relates to the habits we have, what we allow from people, and what we allow and from what we tolerate from ourselves versus calling ourselves on our own BS on why we're accepting certain things. If we're accepting certain things, we tell ourselves it's for a different reason, but really there's an exchange of something that we're getting from someone else. What's the brutal honesty of what you're taking, even when that's just, because nobody has the right to mistreat you, so why don't you set your boundaries? Oh, just because then now they have a title of husband, wife, brother, sister, mother, father, child. No, right? The boundaries, and every human has that right, but every human has to understand that, and not every human understands those rights. And then that links into different things as we go and to live in a world with each other, though, but we have to understand ourselves. So that villain in that creation, as we spoke about, and when she comes up. So the next, it's really understanding what scenarios around me when something happens that bothers me, right? But now my anger's triggered, my frustration because of someone else's actions. We can't control other people's actions, but what effect it has on your own psyche to trigger that villain, and then go into brutal honesty with where you're at. That's the difference of understanding dark thoughts, because we all have them. And if we're brutally honest, and that's what scares us when we have those dark thoughts, but the difference then of the action, right? Are you just having the thoughts? We'll work through it. Yeah, like I said, I want to kill that person for treating me that way and talking that way, and I'm visually actually I do it. For myself, that's a healing. That's it. I liked Halloween, healing of Gothic art. Of I watch movies and it's like, oh, there's an assassin. I'm like, oh, now I feel better, right? Because it took care of a situation, but it helped me understand my own mind. What action somebody takes, well, that's who they really are, right? It is. But the difference too of on the flip side, we think we're a certain way on the superhero side of what we would do in certain scenarios, and you can look at your own life when you do step in, when you take the action of a hero who does help someone else, who is, stepping outside of themselves for whatever reason, who is and for yourself, because you're like, that's also right to be a hero and stepping into your own light. What's the fear if you were better? What like, where does that fear come from? And I had that too. You get better in different things. When are you used? And when you're allowing yourself to be, we self-sabotage in a different way. But the guilt of that, maybe that shouldn't be, or somebody not wanting you to be the best version of yourself. So it's like crabs in a bucket and they're pulling you back and you feel guilty that you don't deserve that. Well, that's a confusion, because you can see yourself at times and picture this hero, and there's times that it matches based on things and actions you've taken in your life, but your true self at the core still is struggling, and that's when the villain pops in to bring you back down, because the reality is that villain, when it pops up, is in your head convincing you of other stories, and maybe even taking you back to a scenario too where you didn't react the way you wanted to, or feel you should have. But the difference is understanding the lesson and going, well, now if that situation ever arose, this, because you reflected, is how I would respond, and it can put you into that superhero position again to outdo that villain. Sometimes liking the villain, it's like, well, I need this villain because I'm in a situation that's dangerous or fearful, and I want to become the bigger bad guy so I can take that bad guy out. So that's where the non-judgment, but the understanding of that and the character development come in. Because from there, right now in a world, as we talk, like AI and different things, what is that? Well, that's the play of image and graphics and programming, and there's so many things that are around that it's like bringing in that modern world. But the metaphor and the reflection of that is, well, if you're not programming yourself and in your own programming, and understand where your programming came from in your mind, somebody else is controlling your mind. You're allowing somebody else to dictate and run your life based on the projected thoughts and feelings that you think somebody else is having, and you self-sabotage or take less because you feel you're not worthy. And that's the metaphor and understanding of that transition and the difference in responsibility, because that gives somebody their power back. So those are the internal battles. So it is a joke, but it's like pretend you're microchipped. There's, how long that was in the media. If you get, not getting into that, vaccine, no vaccine, you got a chip, you have this, all that. Just pretend you do. Everybody's chipped now. The whole world. Everybody. Your brain. Who's programming that chip connected to the overall motherboard that's programming everything? Are you going to fight it, or are you going to work with it, or just understand it? Because that's a representation of your own brain versus your ego that's getting in the way. When is the difference? Like, when are your brain and what that pre-programming is, and when you confuse yourself, these are the internal battles that are going on. Villain and superhero, angel and demon that we all have. So that's bringing it now to transition from our minds into our bodies, and because our bodies are what get us around this world, right? What are the limitations of a body now? If you want to do something, you have an idea, you want to go on vacation, what's limiting you from that vacation in this exact moment? Is it financial? Is it physical? Is it some belief, like, is it an attachment to a family member? What would it be? Because more freedoms come from, and the mind can expand, that goes into reality when those barriers aren't there, because certain circumstances aren't a factor. And then, are they real circumstances, or are they excuses and circumstances? Or do you have to work towards, like, okay, I want to go on vacation, I want to leave the country right now. What are my limitations? Okay, my limitations are financial. Okay, how could I make up the money? When would that timeline be? Okay, my limitations are physical. Is there a way to make a transition that I can get healthier? And then I plan that. And that slows down time, but it's still projected time in planning so we have to open the mind to understand everything, to then come down to a plan. Well, that's exactly what we're doing here too, in the understandings of how to build something out for our healing of the base with like anybody's brain with trauma to heal that and the understanding, and then the next layer, right, on how to build from that to build ourselves as better humans, and then we to build the body we want and feel great because we feel we deserve it, but also at the same time not shaming the process, more understanding it, because said all things in our body, all pain is a sign something's wrong, right? On a different level, but how much we pay attention to, and then people can't figure it out. It's inevitable. This person had a heart attack. They think it's from nowhere. No, it's not. You can look at somebody's habits in their life, not just it's not just the DNA and those things, and determine that somebody adrenaline, next thing, they're putting always work as a priority versus something else. Well, they're running away from something too. It's just different. So that's the representation of the game that we're playing with ourselves. And you as a 3D character is a player now, and you're actually in the game. So awareness, this is how we build out the program. So for like in detail, like if I'm working somebody closer and we're working on this, and there's something I have an idea to send to you to see because of the way you've been working, but putting you in this now. And so, like a 90-day program would always work in a cycle. It would just change based on that person's individual needs of where they're at. But in theory, in life, everybody is here. If they could focus to be here, they would get better. Like if you want to be in the best shape of your life in the next 90 days, but the priorities are the health is in bad shape, and the finances and the family and the thing, you'd have to go, okay, where's the one focus that I need to do most? And that's what I should focus on. The most successful people in the world and like the billionaires think they only take on one or two tasks in a day to complete, not a whole bunch. And that's based on an ongoing plan and loop. So, that first month, if a person to analyze only themselves, not change anything, not to try to change anything. Because the biggest things too, people jump into a training program, and it could be with anything, but like in terms of health, right? Oh, here's a new diet, a new plan, and some can just jump in and they're ready because like at that time in their life to be able to make that commitment. But most people jump in and then that's why they fall short because it doesn't align with where their priorities are really at. And then they either blame the program or blame, something else or make an excuse. And then that's the cycle again of the self-worth that is, it's either the blame one where it's, oh, blah, blah, and sometimes it's actually true. Sometimes it's just not a good program, but it's at that time, like, what's the difference? So that's when you get into you could sign up for something. I had that happen to me, the sign note, and paid for something, and it was just a complete scam. And well, that's a different set of issues that brought up a whole different thing because they didn't have what they were selling and promised. But if somebody, okay, you get into an established program and there's people that have results and everything else, but you're the one falling short of that, where's the mismatch? Was it really the program or was it a timing thing, right? With your own self and your own priorities. So the first stage needs to be awareness and that detective work of your own life, right? Is what, and that reflection completely, which makes a big difference of where you're at, why and brutal honesty. And most people have a hard time doing that because it would be like tracking, documentation. What are you really eating? We lie to ourselves so much. We even think the amounts that we're eating or we're having is right. Meanwhile, we could be way under eating, that's a problem, or overeating, and we don't, but how can you change and be honest with yourself if you're not willing to look at yourself? So that's stage one. And then stage two in that month or next month is that reflection, reviewing all of the documentation, just like, okay, you're a detective and you're collecting information on yourself. Now you analyze it. Wait a minute. What's the evidence? These are the thoughts that I have, but these are the actions I take. These are the goals I set, but this is what I'm doing. This is not an alignment. Doesn't make sense. Third phase is going through that action plan from that assessment of, okay, what would the next 90 days be? That's a realistic plan finally that I need to stick to get. So it's now the priorities are straight. Now we know, okay, I have all these goals, big goals, visions, dreams, but I'm gonna have to put this one further in the future, knowing that because this is where the priority is. So let's get through these 90 days. We have a success. Now we move on to the next loop. So that's where we're at now. So I hope that makes sense. And I'm going to send you a message with something else after.